Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, host of the Business Insurance Zone, and today with me from OutlookLife.com, Peggy Mace. Hey Peggy.
Hi Steve, how are you?
I'm just Danny. Welcome to the interview again.
Yes,
today we're talking about term versus whole life, which talk about controversy, that's a pretty big one. And we're also going to talk a little bit about term versus whole life in a health condition, because that's kind of a different story. So talk about a little bit about term and whole life. Whole life, it's for your whole life. Term is for a temporary time.
Right.
Talk a little about the yin and the yang of that.
Yeah. People often ask us whether to buy a term life insurance policy or a permanent policy, such as whole life, or else universal life also has some guarantees that you can get that will make it not lapse for the whole rest of your life. In other words, make it a permanent policy. And it does depend on the situation. It depends on the need, whether your need is temporary or whether it's a permanent need. In other words, do you want something that's just going to pay up until your kids graduate from college, or whether your mortgage is paid off, or do you want something that will last the whole rest of your life and be there for your final expenses and that type of thing?
Well, you just brought up an interesting point, because when I think of final expenses, I'm pretty certain everybody's going to have final expenses.
Right.
And because everybody's going to have a funeral, and because everybody's going to have some final expenses, that portion of any term purchase, when you're considering term versus whole life, I should be considering some portion of that that's going to be forever, because that issue of final expense and funeral costs will never go away. And there could be others. I'm just doing the basics. And so a lot of times we say, well, we're done, we don't need the coverage anymore. But remember, one of the issues on our side when we do the show, I interview a lot of people that they say most of our estate planning, almost all of the very big premium dollars are going to geriatric clients who needed permanent insurance past 65.
Absolutely.
So I just want to make sure our listeners remember things like final expense, as you pointed out, and funeral, they will never go away.
Right.
So they're going to be there forever.
And a lot of people, like you said, they think that I'm going to, well, a common mantra is to, buy term and invest the rest. But they, one health condition, one, really serious medical problem can eat up a lot of what a person saves, whereas life insurance is always going to be there. So it's a safe way to pay for final expenses as well.
And I've noticed that there's always going to be mantras out there and kind of rules of thumb like buy term and invest the difference. But the actual surveys show that clients buy term and spend the difference.
Absolutely,
so we really don't see, we don't obey the ideology that we espouse even in financial planning. Remember, our ideology is one thing, our behavior is quite another. So when I think about it now, let's talk about it. What happens when I have an impairment though? Does that change the thinking?
Well, and that's a good example where the ideology does not necessarily fit. Part of the reason is because not every type of person with an impairment can get a traditional life insurance policy. So yes, for a very healthy 30-year-old young woman, term life insurance may just cost next to nothing and be a wonderful choice. But you get to have a 70-year-old woman with a real serious health condition. She may not even have the choice of buying a term policy. So that is where one of the things that is a misconception is that sometimes serious health conditions do limit the choices you have. The other thing that enters in with a health condition with life insurance is very few people with a health condition are going to improve in their health. There are some that you will. For example, cancer. If you can get through 10 years of remission with cancer, you may eventually be able to get a less expensive life insurance policy than you could when you first got diagnosed with cancer or shortly thereafter. But when you're looking at something more progressive like diabetes, where the risk is always there that you might have neuropathy or some kind of complication develop, it's really best to get the premium locked in as long as you can.
Well, when I think about sometimes you make the decision between term and whole life simply based on, wow, I do have an impairment. It makes it a little bit more expensive, But so that I can buy affordable life, that's why I went over to the term side of the equation. And remember, a lot of these have convertible ability to convert, so you could do it. Maybe you came into money. I saw the last 2 conversions were based on somebody inheriting money.
Right.
And so now they had the money. They said, hey, I also have diabetes type 2. I'm going to make my policy permanent.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about term or whole life and you're having an impairment issue, look at the timeline issues. What are going to be your permanent liabilities versus your temporary liabilities?
Yes.
And just put that and measure that and make a decision. Listen, you can go out to outlooklife.com and look at either the term or permanent, the quotas out there. Or both. Yeah. And look at it both and figure out what's good for you and make sure that it's always affordable life insurance.
That's right. Thank you.